The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're really pleased to have two members of the General Assembly with us today from Newport News. Delegate Monty Mason, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Woody.
Senator John Miller, it's a pleasure as always.
Always good to be with you, Woody. Thank you.
I think both of you last Saturday attended a signature event in Williamsburg, a commemorative session of the General Assembly. I think that happens only once every 4 years.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's a wonderful opportunity to go back to the roots of democracy in Virginia and have the opportunity to sit in that wonderful place and think about all the folks that have had the opportunity to serve Virginia in the General Assembly. And also to think that, 250, 300 years ago, they were doing the same things you were doing. They were doing it probably better than we were, but it is a great opportunity to sort of connect to the past.
And of course, there were some interesting lectures. There was also a very interesting debate, I understand, performed by two actors. Talk to us about that.
Well, it's great, Woody. You hear up here references to our founding fathers, and sometimes people are like, okay, that was hundreds of years ago. But when the General Assembly has the opportunity to see Lord Dunmore disband the House of Burgesses, or to see Patrick Henry and James Madison debate the Constitution and have Patrick Henry sneer at James Madison about his scheme, it was interesting to watch our colleagues see it happen in front of them. And we talk about tourism all the time, but that's happening today at the same place we were. And so it's nice for us to be a part of it, and it was a privilege to say aye and answer the roll call for me in the House of Burgesses.
Of course, tourism is a big part of the economy of the Commonwealth in your district, but I noticed recently that Newport News Shipbuilding announced another layoff. Of course, there are 3 ships, I think, that are leaving there in short order. One of them is being decommissioned. How do we help those people during the interim period before other ships arrive to be worked on?
Well, it's a difficult question, and part of the layoffs are a result of sequestration, and there's just not the work. It is cyclical. The work will be coming back, and in a couple of years, folks will be hired back to work on new ships. But it is difficult, and losing a job is always tough, and we need to be there to make sure that they get the proper benefits.
Talk to us a little bit more about tourism in your district. Excuse me.
Sure. I mean, we're talking about diversifying the economy in the new Virginia economy, and Senator mentioned sequestration, our reliance on defense. Tourism is a backbone of our economy in our area as well, but we also have to diversify and look for new ways. And not at the expense of tourism, but trying to draw new attractions, new marketing, new ways to get, part of what we saw at the commemorative session was the revolutionary city at Colonial Williamsburg, and that's it being acted out right on the streets in front of you. Because it's a new era and so when you're trying to attract and draw people and try to get them to the area, you need multiple things for them to do to try to get them to extend the stay as long as you can.
And of course, the program called Go Virginia is an attempt to get, on a regional basis, more cooperation to encourage economic development.
Well, we've been talking about regionalism. I've been in the area since 1971, and the talks about working together and being more regional have been going on since then. This is another attempt to try and put some money behind ideas that will force regionalism and have areas work together. I think it's a good idea. I'm interested to see how successful it's going to be.
And of course, your district includes one of the big economic drivers, and that's the Port of Virginia. And it affects not only the Newport News area, but it gives Virginia an opportunity to export internationally now, does it not?
Well, it is, as you said, one of the economic drivers in the Commonwealth. The governor's provided $350 million in that bond package that we'll be voting on to try and make additional improvements at the port. And as when the Panama Canal has expanded, these super ships will be able to come to Hampton Roads and for a time We'll be the only port that can accept them because we have dredged and our natural harbor is enough to accommodate them. Other localities will be catching up, but for a time we have an advantage and we need to take advantage of it.
So we need to maintain that competitive advantage at all costs, do we not?
Absolutely, and we talk about the port across Virginia because if you look in their presentation, they show a map of Virginia and all of the businesses that are impacted or born of and working with the port, and they extend to far western Virginia, northern Virginia, the inland port, the port here in Richmond that they're beefing up. So there's really a vital link to all of the Commonwealth, and you led into this with regionalism, and one thing I'm privileged to just become the co-chair of the Hampton Roads Caucus, which is just us getting together, Peninsula and South Side, to talk about issues of import. The first one was the Port of Virginia, the second was the transportation package. But one thing that is important that we constantly emphasize is it can't be the Peninsula against the South Side and vice versa. We have to look as one region working together towards the same goals in order to have the biggest impact that we can have up here.
Senator, how, in your opinion, has the transportation funding mechanism that was adopted in 2013 worked so far?
Not well in Hampton Roads. We were told that we would get $250 million a year to help fund some of those projects that we deem are essential to our economic growth and prosperity. We're getting about $165 million now. Because no one anticipated that the price of gas would go from $3 a gallon to $1.50 a gallon. And so we're hurting on that. There are several measures working their way through the Senate to put a floor in there so we won't get below a certain amount. There are other measures that call for an increase in the tax. You know, we passed that measure 2 years ago, and we were told this will take care of our funding transportation needs for the foreseeable future. Now, to come back 2 years later and say, oh, no, we made a mistake. We put the tax on the wrong place. We should have put it on the pump and not on the wholesale rack. It's a hard sell, and we're going to have to find a way to deal with it, but I don't see the General Assembly increasing the taxes.
So that provides tough challenges for your constituents as well, I take it.
It does. The Hampton Roads area has about $7 billion worth of projects on the table and $1.7 billion of estimated allocated money. So we're going to have to make a lot of important decisions. And I think starting with the congestion ratio being so important is great for us for expanding 64 all the way through northern or western 199 beyond Williamsburg, and then hopefully working with the middle portion of the state to expand all the way to 295. But at the same time, that also puts a burden on local projects. You know, Route 60 that goes down through Grove and comes into Newport News at Lee Hall needs to be widened and expanded. Well, that's never going to have a congestion ratio that even gets you up moves you up the list. So we're going to be putting the burden on some localities on some of these $10, $20 million projects that we have to start thinking about now and can't just let them stack up for 10 years.
So I take it that congestion mitigation is first among equals, so to speak, in terms of the criteria that's used to determine where money goes?
I think congestion mitigation and economic activity that an expanded roadway would bring is important. But I think the transportation folks in Hampton Roads have to realize we can't do everything all at once. The funding just isn't there. You know, I'd like to remodel my kitchen and my bathroom and put a new room in the attic. But I can't do it all at once. You got to phase it in. So rather than the 7 projects that Delegate Mason talked about, maybe we can do 1 or 2 this year and phase the others in, because the funding just isn't there, and I'm not quite sure we're going to have the funding we need to do all 7.
Now, has anybody talked about the continued use of a public-private partnership and tolling?
Well, there's a lot of conversation about tolling in the General Assembly, most of it not in our area up in Northern Virginia this year. But if there's going to be a third crossing, there are going to have to be several components on the table. A high-capacity lane, whether there's some sort of mass transit, and there will have to be some discussion as far as tolling goes for another crossing.
Now,
And just to piggyback on that, I've got a bill that's coming up for a hearing today in the Transportation Committee that requires any major crossing of Hampton Roads include a multimodal component. Good. We need to find ways to get people out of their cars. We're never going to pave our way out of this. We've got to be able to establish that whether it's a bus lane or light rail or whatever mode, that there is, every time we cross that Hampton Roads a multimodal component.
Many levers to relieve congestion. The rail, having a third train to Newport News, bus, high-capacity transit, even light rail in Virginia Beach to Norfolk. I mean, there've got to be other components, because he's right. If we waved the magic wand today and had 3 lanes all the way to Richmond, you'd be over capacity for cars immediately.
I want to draw on your expertise as a non-lawyer on courts of justice. He tells me he's a non-lawyer, but he learns very quickly. There's some issues around drones, a new technology that's continuing to be debated on your committee. Talk to us about the pros and cons of that new technology.
It's been a hot topic up here, with the immediate focus upon making sure people's rights and privacy is not violated. I think that's something we all agree on. But we're constantly talking about a new Virginia economy. And in Newport News and on the Virginia Peninsula, we have many companies that are building unmanned systems, aerial, ground, underwater. And so they continually say to me, everything I hear coming out of Richmond is limiting my industry, stepping on it, and not helping me grow and expand. So we have to work together. And I've worked with the authors of the bills in courts of justice last year and this year to make sure that we do the things. The drone hovering outside of your window, we want to avoid and to eliminate at all costs. But the ability to use drones to do things in the modern era, Dominion Power, surveying their power lines in the Appalachian Mountains, you can do that with a drone. A lot safer, a lot easier. The technology is only limited by your imagination, and we need to help that industry grow.
And of course, you have Jefferson Labs, which is a real crucible of innovation. You don't want to stop that.
No, we're in a great competition. There's on the table a federal expansion, $600 million of expansion.
$600 million.
Thousands of jobs would be involved, and we're competing with New York for that expansion. And the governor has wisely included $2.4 million to help make the improvements that need to be made at Jefferson Lab, and hopefully the federal government will decide that this is the perfect place for it, and we will get that expansion.
Now, the foundation for our workforce that we anticipate for this new Virginia economy is really K through 12, is it not?
It is.
And you've been involved in education issues for years, especially standards of learning and other issues. I know you have some initiatives you'd like to talk about.
Well, the bill that I'm most excited about this year is the redesign of high schools. We've got to ensure that our children are prepared either for college or for the workforce. And so what the new high school will look like, should this bill pass, is that for the first 2 years, everyone will get core courses. And then those who are deciding to go on to college will continue on that track. The rigor will be increased. But those students who think, well, I'd like to make $100,000 a year running a crane in the shipyard, or I'd like to make $80,000 being a computer programmer in Northern Virginia, we will give credit to those students for getting an internship, an externship, for earning industry certifications. So when they come out of high school, they've got some paper and experience to say, I can do this job. I think that's the way of the future, that we will prepare students both for college and for the workforce, and I think it's a great step forward.
Now, what about early childhood education before kindergarten?
Well, that is absolutely essential, and all the studies have shown that the children who have that pre-K experience are prepared to learn and do much better in school, and so we need to expand the funding for that opportunity as well.
And it's a cost saver. It's almost like pay me now, pay me more later in terms of rehab, if you will.
Well, making sure students are prepared for kindergarten and ready to learn when they show up is critical. And it's also key to make sure that regardless of means, they have the opportunity to do so. But finding the folks that need the help and making sure they get them is critical. Senator Miller has been an amazing leader in education for our area in the Commonwealth of Virginia, from K through graduate school, and all of the works that he's done. And his efforts to reshape high school, having them ready in pre-K, moving them along, but then reshaping high school to this career and technical education opportunities. Our community college system is a phenomenal workforce development program on the peninsula. We're poised to take advantage of some money that's going to be put into the community college system in our area in particular, and overcoming the stigma that everyone must go to college. We want to give everyone the opportunity to, but as the senator said, Continental is trying to hire 500 people in the next 5 years for high-paying, high-skilled, highly technical jobs. Training people to be ready to go and make $60,000 to $80,000 a year is a good thing, and you can always continue your education as you're going along. Flexibility is key, and this man's been a leader in the arena.
Now, new
I'm going
tech,
to
go
take him
ahead.
everywhere I go.
Please, please. New technologies bring new challenges. You're working on some computer fraud issues, I believe.
Yes, sir. My professional life, I'm a fraud and risk specialist for Visa, and I try to work with e-commerce authentication, making sure Monty Mason's who he says he is when he's on the internet. It would seem easy, but there's another Monty Mason in my town, so it's hard to validate. But what we've seen here, and there's several computer crimes bills. I was just talking to the chairman of the Civil Subcommittee of Courts of Justice about this today. He said because the whole section needs a lot of work, and I have 3 or 4 bills that with the attempt of making sure if we get our hands on people that are using computers to exploit people, to steal information, to breach systems, that we're able to prosecute them with the fullest extent of the law. But it's a place we have a real tough balance. We want to make sure that if you call your computer person and he comes to fix your computer, that he or she doesn't run afoul of the law when they're in there trying to help you. But we make sure that if someone breaches your system, starts stealing information from you, particularly governments and public utilities are one of the focuses of my bill, that we give the Commonwealth attorneys every ability to prosecute these people if we can catch them.
So how does this relate to the Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act?
Just one of the tools we're looking at using. It'll be interesting to see how the criminal subcommittee takes that. We haven't heard that yet. But all that's trying to do is if we can link 3 more people. So sometimes these people are in foreign countries or you never get your hands on who they are, but they need people on the ground to monetize the data and the information that's stolen. So RICO gives us the ability, if we can put 3 or more people together in a criminal enterprise, we can again go after them and try to get to the person that's behind it.
Senators often said that the intellect can only absorb what the posterior will withstand. What about physical education in our schools?
Well, we need to have more physical activity in our schools. I'm very excited the Senate has passed my bill requiring in K through 5 at least 20 minutes every day of some sort of physical activity, whether that's recess, which not all Virginia schools provide their students, whether it's walking briskly around the halls, whether it's incorporating movement into classroom instruction, playing hopscotch to learn addition, jumping on the 3 and the 5 and the 8. Those types of things. This is the first generation of children who are not expected to outlive their parents, and childhood obesity is a huge problem. And this is one small step. And I'm pleased that the House's Education Committee has passed a physical activity bill. Mine's already passed the Senate, so this year I think we're going to do it.
And what about the State Board of Education in relation to graduation requirements?
Well, the graduation requirements, if we redesign high school, they will change. And I think that part of that redesign would be a reducing of the number of SOL tests. We currently have 29. The federal government says you only need 17. And I think if we redesign high school, part of the result of that will be a reduction in SOL tests.
Can I refuse as a parent to have my child take a standard of learning exam? And if so, what happens?
Absolutely. And your parents are free to opt out of an SOL test. But what happens is the school gets penalized. For a student whose parents opt them out, their score is recorded as a 0. And we ought not to be penalizing the school for a decision the parents make that they're completely within their rights to make. So I have legislation that will be considered this week that says that there won't be a 0 recorded. There'll be no score because no one took the test. And that way, I think we'll see an improvement in the accreditation rates, because sometimes if several parents opt out, that will affect the school's accreditation.
The Senator's home analogy applies to education. You don't just do it all in one fell swoop. You've got to make progress, but to have a concerted effort that you're working on year after year after year.
Now, what about charter schools? Are you hearing much about that in your district and the need for them?
School choice is alive and well in my district. York County has a charter school. Newport News has the Aviation Academy, has Smart Beginnings, has Achievable Dream. So I see no problem whatsoever, particularly in our area, in my district, where there is a lack of school choice. The charter school bill that you're seeing that come through that I voted against is centralizing the decision making in Richmond for some very challenging school systems. I understand. But I'd rather see us go to school boards and put together a process that you must follow if you have a charter school application. And people say, oh, well, they'll just continue to deny them. Well, if they do, they're mostly school boards, mostly elected, and if it is a move afoot in the area, you vote them out and get a school board who will accept it. But I don't see doing it from Richmond as the solution.
So that HR, the resolution, is counterintuitive to the concept of local control.
Well, it is absolutely opposed. Delegate Mason's absolutely right. The Constitution says that local school boards run education in Virginia, not the state. And to allow the state to start picking and choosing where charter schools are going to be located is just wrong. We have 9 charter schools in Virginia, but the reason that we don't have more is because we do such a marvelous job on specialty schools. You have magnet schools, and you have all sorts of other opportunities where students can go for different types of education. And I think that's what's keeping the number of charter schools low.
Delegate Mason, I'm sure you have a number of veterans in your district. I think statewide we have close to 800,000. What are we doing for our veterans?
We have the largest number of veterans that are going to be entering the workforce in the nation. And so we really are working both sides of the coin. The V3 Virginia Values Veterans Program, going out and try to certify companies saying, hey, we've got this incredible workforce trying to come in. What do you have? What jobs and opportunities do you have here? Then working with the Transition Assistance Program, their budget requests in from new FTE for more money to really focus on, Admiral Secretary Harvey calls it the secret decoder ring, that your job in the military, what does that mean in the civilian world? And so to try to mix and match these highly skilled, highly trained workers with local opportunities, because we want to keep them on the Virginia Peninsula. We want to make them a part of our workforce, a part of the new Virginia economy. They're highly skilled, highly trained, but we've got to be able to match the skills with the jobs available.
And Senator, go ahead.
I just want to say that Delegate Mason's been a real leader in veterans issues in the General Assembly and has done terrific work, and I applaud him for those efforts.
Well, what about veterans transitioning from our theaters of war, and they've gained a lot of practical experience that they can use to garner a decent job? How are we helping them in that transition?
Well, we're trying to get our community colleges to give them credit for the skills that they have learned while they're in the armed forces, and I think that will help a great deal.
And I think there is a particular program for someone who's been a medic, for example.
The House just passed the bill that if you're a qualified medical corpsman in the Army or in the military, particularly in theaters of war, when you come home, you automatically are certified and you can get a job and move forward. Those are the type of things, because whether it's the job and the workforce element of it or the healthcare needs, it's a whole new era of healthcare needs and challenges that the veterans are having when they come back home. They're much younger. They have PTSD problems. Everything has changed. So just as technology is changing the world we live in, the veterans coming back from the theater of war in the modern era have different skill sets for the workforce, but different challenges that we have to help them overcome and in order to adapt into society.
You mentioned PTSD. I think that you've had debates with your colleagues on the courts of justice about creating a separate court to deal with veterans.
Yes, sir. The Courts of Justice Criminal Subcommittee is not a fan of specialized courts. Justice, they say, is blind in the eyes of the law. But specialized dockets have proven to be extremely successful. I've seen Commonwealth attorneys stand before saying these drug courts or drug dockets at first I thought were a bad idea. I've watched them work. They're rigorous. We're not treating people differently. We're still punishing them for their crimes and giving them and the offenses that they've committed. But we're laying out a very rigorous, concerted effort and taking into consideration where they come from, some of their background, and trying to help them move beyond any crime that may have been committed.
And Hampton, Virginia is a great example of that, and they have that sort of specialized docket, and they work with the CSBs and the VA hospital there. And folks who have PTSD and end up in the criminal justice system, a lot of times they just need to be diverted and get the medical help they need, and that will help improve the situation. So
Exactly.
Hampton is doing a great job so far.
Now, I assume some of those veterans are subject to some of the practices that affect all of our citizenry in the state of Virginia, and that is the complex of payday and title loans, that title loan companies we have. Somebody told me, I think it was Senator Serval, who says there are more payday title loan entities in the state of Virginia than there are McDonald's hamburger joints.
That's true. That's true. You know, I had a bill, as Senator Lockheed, also limiting payday loans at 36%. If you're a member of the armed forces and you walk into a payday loan store in Newport News, your rate is 36%. If Delegate Mason or I walk in, we pay 288%. It's just not fair. The bill was not successful, and we'll continue on the fight. But locking these folks in debt and trying to get them out of it is very, very difficult. And today there are alternatives. You know, 10, 15 years ago there weren't. But now a lot of credit unions have opportunities where if you have a payday loan, they'll pay it off. You'll get some counseling to show you how to avoid getting into that situation in the future. And you'll get a low interest loan that you can pay back without these horrendous interest rates.
Problem in your district as well?
It is, and we've got to find a way. I've talked to credit unions and small banks to see, is there a way we can all work together and put together some sort of pool. Unfortunately, a lot of these don't have things that you can lien, but some of the car titles could get folks in an extreme problem. But it's like the senator said, you know that it's a short-term fix that creates an immediate long-term problem.
You mentioned earlier our community colleges and how important they are. Talk to us a little bit more about the community colleges in your district.
Well, we've got, you know, one thing I learned when I started doing this job is a lot of people talk about workforce development.
Right.
You hear a lot about that. Our area is fortunate that our community college has an outstanding workforce development program. And they've been working with, whether it's the link to the high schools, whether it's the link to the communities, whether it's the link to the Peninsula Workforce Development Groups, and just to try to make sure that they tailor the programs necessary to the jobs and the requirements needed. It's tough because they want people to come in and go through and get a certification. But one of the get a degree. So, but we know that some of the financial aid is afforded to those who have degree requirements, but some of these technical and credentialing classes were not eligible for it. That's something we're trying to address in this budget, and a great example of understanding a need, understanding where we're trying to go, and applying money to the right place to do it. We're extremely fortunate to have our community college system poised and ready to take advantage of that opportunity.
Last 30 seconds to you on our community colleges.
Well, I think they're doing a great job, and Thomas Nelson has got funding for Advanced Manufacturing Center, which will continue that link between developing the workforce and providing jobs to people.
Great. Thank you for being here, Senator John Miller, Delegate Monty Mason. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.